Hello, I am Simulated Irk and welcome to Simulated Irk. This is a new series that I'm calling Sydney Bus Simulator. It is a map based on a real part of Sydney, and it was so good I was randomly flicking through YouTube at my place of employment on a break, and I noticed that there was a Sydney map for OMSI 2. And so I thought, you beauty, this is really good, because often in terms of simulation and localization, Australia really misses out, especially in train simulators and bus simulators. Sometimes I think, oh, it's really good if I can even see an Australian or a Sydney bus skin. But this is a map of OMSI 2 that is dedicated to the Northern Beaches area of Manly. In case you're new here, I'm Simulated Irk. There is a lot of simulated videos of various types: trains, buses, trams, trucks, flight simulators, etc. SimulatedIrkGaming.com, or indeed YouTube, Simulated Irk, lots of different playlists there. So I've recorded some footage and I am using AI because in OMSI I just find it easier to do it that way, especially considering that I am talking, etc., rather than driving the bus. At the moment we're at Manly Wharf, which is quite appropriate because the map is named after Manly on the Northern Beaches. They used to say that Manly was 7 miles from Sydney and a million miles from Care. So we're going to go on various bus rides in and around the Northern Beaches area of Sydney. This is a companion series to what I'm calling Simulated Irk London Bus Simulator, with the London map on OMSI 2. And bus episodes come out on Simulated Irk on Tuesdays. So this is as it was recorded. My computer isn't a potato. I recently doubled the memory and put a new hard drive in since the time that I've recorded the recent London episodes. So in theory it should run a lot better. I can run very well Microsoft Flight Simulator, GTA, Wreckfest and the like. But OMSI, because the way I like to describe OMSI is that it's an old engine, it's an old chassis. You can put a new body on it, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to work well. And so things like glitches, etc., are as recorded. Now we're at Brookvale Bus Depot on the Northern Beaches, and certainly a huge difference between depots such as this, and we'll go through and we'll have a look at the other depots as well that are on the map. There's a total of four depots on the bus map: 3 State Transit and 1 Forest. So this gives you an idea. A lot of the buses in Australia are parked in the open air with security fences. There are areas to work on the buses. There's bus washers, etc., but a lot of the parking is done outside in areas such as this. So this is Brookvale Bus Depot. We'll have a look at the other ones in turn: North Sydney and Mona Vale, and also the Forest Bus Depot as well. So State Transit is what used to be known as the government bus operator in Sydney, but there's a whole heap of different contracts for different areas, mixture of government and quote-unquote private operators. They're all operating under government contractors now. So the whole idea for all the buses in Sydney and surrounding areas to have the same look and feel, same ticketing system, etc., regardless of who the actual operator is, fairly similar to what has indeed happened in places like London, etc. So what I thought that I would do on this introduction, as we are having a look around the areas, there'll be a link in the show notes to where you can download this map, and this frequently asked questions, or as the authors have put it, the frequently annoying questions, will answer some of the questions and some of the things that will come up during these episodes, and I'll add my thoughts as we go on. Question: is this a real place? Yep, Manly is a real place, and we have endeavoured to recreate it for you in all of its finest details. The Manly map includes areas from the city of Sydney to the northern beaches via the Harbour Bridge, lots of beaches, and some very narrow suburban streets. If you don't believe us, go to Google Street View and compare the pair. Now, we're going to have to remember question 1 because it gets referenced frequently during these FAQs. Is this a real place? And yes, Manly and the Northern Beaches are real places, and I can confirm, even though I've never been a resident of the Northern Beaches, or as some people call it, the Insular Peninsula, that this is what it looks like. As we'll say, this is what it looks like, and there's been a great amount of detail put in that locals especially, people who have been to Sydney, people who live in Sydney. I've lived in Sydney for pretty much my whole life. I'm now based in Newcastle, 2 to 3 hours north of Sydney, but I can certainly appreciate the amount of details that are put in. So I'm just working on my camera skills. Is this a real place? That's question 1. Remember that, because that will come up really. Is this a heavy map? Will it work on my system? Of course it is. There are 900 tiles in size and features over 6,000 custom scenery objects. Recent feedback has shown that efforts to use lower texture resolutions has improved performance for lower end users. Saying that, we have never seen your computer before, nor have we used it. The map is free to download. Give it a go, see how it goes for you, then you'll have your answer. And I can confirm, yes, it will work on my system. Yes, there are bugs, but I think that's an OMSI thing. I don't think that'll necessarily matter what my computer is. As I said earlier, I can run things like Microsoft Flight Simulator quite easily. You know, Wreckfest, GTA, etc. All sorts of train simulators. And I haven't really played around with the settings for OMSI. I haven't really played around with them at all, but there are a lot of settings that you can. So there's a lot of settings in OMSI that you can indeed experiment in. There's various YouTube videos around with some of the settings. Some of the settings I have adjusted, but not too much. So you can adjust the settings to try and get more out of OMSI. The map takes ages to load at the start. Is this normal? Depending on your machine, yes, it will get quicker. Okay, this one's an important one when you realise how much work goes into these maps Why has the map taken 7 years to get to this stage? Building this map has been a hobby for some old farts in their spare time between looking after kids and pretending to listen to their wives. All textures have had to be photographed on long walking expeditions, often involving children, before 3D models are created in Blender. All spines have been custom made too. All fonts have been custom made, as have all intersections. Any map designer who does more than use default Spandu objects and think up a name knows that this can be a drawn out process. And as we go on, we'll be able to show you some of the custom objects and a lot of the custom objects, intersections, etc. That have been created. Because if you, for instance, OMSI 2 originally came out of Germany and Europe. So if you want to design like a German map, for instance, there'd be a lot of resources that you'd be able to use. This sort of thing happens in train simulators all the time where people want to create maps, and so if they're creating, say, a UK map or a European map or an American map, there's usually a lot of resources that are available that people have made, sometimes the game developers have made, that you can use, and you can use it quite easily, and then you adjust the scenery and all of that sort of thing. But when it comes down to, for instance, an Australian map like we can see here, a lot of things have to be built from the ground up. And there's also the added complication in OMSI of right-hand drive buses driving on the left-hand side of the road. It can be done, as you can see, the London map. There's starting to be more UK maps that are out now, which is fantastic. Why did you release the map when it clearly isn't finished? Because we wanted to get it out there. Is anything ever really finished? There are plenty of maps that don't get released, and alone 3 times. Act 1, Act 2, and now Act 3. Act 3 has 4 versions. This is mainly Act 3. We hope to have all routes in full by the end of version 4 before we move on to Act 4. And this seems to be a question which I had. Why haven't I heard of this map, the Manly OMSI map, before now? Progress was meticulously archived brick by brick virtually on the now defunct AussieX.org, which I'd never heard of. Chances are you'd never heard of it because you weren't doing OMSI at the time, correct? Or you've been more focused on local maps and mods. In fact, for me talking, the London DLC was the one that really got me back into OMSI. You know, I'd sort of put it in the too hard basket sort of thing, but the London map came out. Then again, maybe you haven't been looking at all the bus stop ads and billboards we've been doing across the northern beaches. We even put one up in Bagola. Nobody knows why. This is a good one. My bus struggles to get up all the hills that you have in your map. These hills appear far too steep for these buses. Why did you invent these hills to make your map less repetitive? The hills are real, and I can confirm the hills are real. Sydney was built around a spectacular harbour that is framed by lots of hills. If you don't believe you can get up Spit Hill, have some concrete for breakfast and have another go. And if you have a look at the London map, if you have a look at some of the Berlin maps, for instance, those areas are very, very flat. They're in areas in Sydney that are not flat at all, as we'll see as we go through this video and through this series. Why can't I pronounce all these funny place names? I'm just going to say something inappropriate on my video and laugh. And me talking here, there's some places around that I might not necessarily know as a native Sydney-sider, but not my part of Sydney. There might be some places that I might be saying wrong because I've never heard them say it, or people from there say it one way, but other people say it another way. And same where I'm living in Newcastle now. There's some places that I've heard pronounced one way, and then other people pronounce it the other way, and they say, "Oh no, you've been saying it wrong the whole time." Answer: you do know that doing that, especially in a role-playing English accent, is tantamount to treason in Australia and is considered a wee bit racist. We have a YouTube clip in which a Sheila, a lady, pronounces them in a fairly broad accent. Good luck. bit.ly/speak manly. Just make sure you pick the correct clip if you search for it, and not one called How to Develop a Manly Voice, Art of Manliness, unless of course you want to sound older in your YouTube videos. I have decided to go for a trip into the city in the morning and the traffic is diabolical. Surely nowhere in the world has this sort of traffic. Are you sure this is real? Answer: see question 1. Question 1, is this real? Answer 1, yes it is. Some of these are very, very random and very, very local. I appreciate them, but others who aren't local to Sydney might not appreciate them. When I drive on the bridge, meaning the Sydney Harbour Bridge, it doesn't appear, and I end up making an unscheduled visit to the lads at St Aloysius, which is a private boys' school. Is their canteen better than the North Sydney Depot meal room? And just on meal rooms, bus driver meal rooms are way better than train driver meal rooms, I believe. Maybe it's the fact that drivers are there for longer for buses with split shifts and not wanting to travel home in between shifts and that sort of stuff. The bridge, the Sydney Harbour Bridge, is 503 metres long. If you have your maximum object distance lower than that, you may take an early bath. The deep end at North Sydney Pool, which is right next to the Sydney Harbour Bridge, is pretty deep, but not deep enough to catch the bus to passenger satisfaction. Besides, school canteen food could never compete with the culinary delights of a depot meal room. Question: that traffic light interchange above the Warringah Expressway makes your map look crap. It is embarrassing that you build a map so badly that it does this. And again, that's partly C question 1. Question 1, is this real? Answer 1, yes it is. The traffic light phases are real. It took us about 30 minutes and 4 video cameras to get it correct. It is perhaps embarrassing, but works pretty well in real life to manage all that traffic. Question 8, why are the streets lanes so narrow? See question 1. Question 1, are these real places? Answer 1, yes they are. Question 9, why are there so many lanes going to the Harbour Bridge? Also, see question 1. Question 1, is this real? Answer 1, yes it is. The Warringah Freeway was built in 1968. The Sydney Harbour Bridge itself was built in and opened in 1932. Since then, it has also been changed around for the Sydney Harbour Tunnel. Question 10. Why are there trees on footpaths? Why do they overhang roads? Again, see question 1. Question 1. Is this real? Answer 1. Yes, it is. I am intimidated by the Warringah Expressway. Any suggestions? Turn collisions off and pick a lane. The red bus lanes are there as a suggestion. Shouldn't you put a bit more amber between red and green traffic lights? Nope, we don't do that rubbish in Australia. A green traffic signal is a challenge, a competition to drag race, if you will. So just on that, and it will become clear when we actually leave the depots. We're at the Forest Depot at the moment. We don't get, I think it's about 4 or 5 seconds, if that, of the amber light, and we don't get the pre-warning amber light, red light thing together like in a lot of places in Europe. to tell us that the lights are about to go green. We don't get those. So that's just a interesting aside. Why did you include the Viro, Mercedes-Benz 405, Alexander and Saitaro in the map and no decent buses? To be honest, we didn't know any other buses. Releasing the map has opened our eyes to various models out there. The Enviro has our custom cash desk and Aussie coins, notes and tickets. If you want to use your own buses, then go for it, but don't whinge if they don't work. When are you going to build some buses that actually drive through Manly? We are in the map building business. We are entirely aware that building a bus is a nuanced balance between polygons and scripting. We have always felt that investigating this scripting hocus pocus would take away from the speed which we build the map. The other aspect of that, this is a hobby, we don't get paid, and this is designed to fulfill our interests, mainly bringing the northern beaches to the world in all its scenic beauty. Over the journey, many have offered to build a bus to suit the map, but none have ever been finished, unfortunately. We'd love to see authentic two-door buses driving along our map, but given the amount of work required to build a bus, we understand why none has come along which 300% suits our map. Now we're at the Warringah Mall bus interchange. And this is another one which talks about buses. I'll just read some of the answer. We are building a map, quite a big one in fact, as it currently encompasses a large part of the northern beaches and stretches from Mona Vale to the city and out to Chatswood and Terry Hills. And in some context, I think I read that there's something like 50 different routes that have been used, and we're talking at about 40 kilometres north of Sydney in total from the, or maybe 30 kilometres from end to end. This has been by chipping away at a challenge over an 8-year period and sticking to some maxims and principles along the way. The first one of which was to stick to building a map. Others can build buses and we encourage them to do so. If anyone wants to build a bus for the map, then great, we will support them as we can, but we have no intentions of building buses. Here's a funny one. The passengers on my unsupported bus don't go to the back of the bus. What can I do? You have 3 options. Use the correct bus as in one included in the map. Ask the passenger's family to move to the back of the bus. Or yell at the kid with the surfboard standing near the rear door who is blocking things. Why aren't there any double-decker buses included? This map is based upon routes that were run before December 2017, when Northern Beaches routes were dramatically reorganised due to the introduction of the Beeline bus. So the Beeline bus is a double-decker bus route that runs from the Northern Beaches all the way into Sydney. And so in some areas it has dedicated bus lanes and shelters, passenger information systems, etc. Bright, big, yellow double-decker buses. But this map was set before then. Truth is, before Beeline, there hasn't been a double-decker on the Northern Beaches for decades. Manly Act 4 will include double-decker capability with the Beeline in some sort of chronological feature. There is a rare breed of double-deckers to be found in the forest, i.e. at the Forest Bus Depot, at various times in the morning and afternoon peaks. My double decker won't fit under all the traffic light post arms. What can I do? Realise that you are probably in part of the map where only single deckers run. We do not have double decker buses in suburban areas of Sydney, full stop. Every bridge and roof that is intended to have clearance for a double decker has clearance for a double decker. So now that there are some double decker buses that are back in Sydney, and it took, sometime it's only been basically the last 10 years that they've come back in limited forms. There's only certain routes that they can operate on. So now we're driving a bus out of the depot. From memory, this is North Sydney Depot. I've only been past the bus depot at Brookvale. I haven't been past any of the others. And I don't know what that beeping is. Maybe it's, I don't know what that beeping is. But the depot boom gate works. Watch this. That's cool. So you can see some of the detailed traffic lights coming up, for instance. That is how Australian traffic lights look. There will be some time, and they do run down narrow streets such as this to get wherever they're going. And speaking of turning intersections with buses, the intersections are too tight. I can't turn the corner with my bus. Any suggestions? Firstly, don't drive a bendy bus, or that's what we usually call articulated buses. Don't drive a bendy bus on any route except for the M20 or M30. Secondly, to turn the corner, you may need to turn into the second lane from the curb. This is standard practice in Sydney, and one that you can actually legally do. Because of the length and the size of buses and trucks, etc., if you're making and this is one thing that people often don't do in bus and truck simulators, if you're making a left turn, we're in a right-hand drive bus. If you're making a left turn, if you're turning left, what that means is you don't have to be in the left lane to turn into the left lane depending on the intersection. You can actually be in the lane next to the left lane and you can turn from there, and we'll see some examples when we see some buses driving. The route numbers confuse me. What can I do? So there are some, I haven't turned the route markers on, but in the manual you'll be able to see the different route numbers and how they're actually grouped together. So in the route markers, they've grouped the colours based on their terminating points or the corridors that they use. So here's an interesting one, and one that I've spoken about on train simulators, where you have to go searching for objects and the like instead of just driving the bus or driving the tram. I find the timetable journal system far too confusing. Is there a chance that you can just change it so I can drive Route 144s back and forth between Manly and Chatswood all day? The system matches reality. It is far more interesting than the same route all day. The RSPCA, in other words our animal protection group, would have something to say if drivers were forced to do that all day. Can we get a passenger style timetable which shows what shifts we need to be on? This simulation is a driver simulator experience, not a passenger simulator experience. How do the journals work? Now, bus drivers call them journals. Train drivers in Sydney call them diagrams. The idea is that bus drivers in Sydney seldom drive the same route all day between two destinations. They mix it up, which is possible as there are many terminus that offer interchange between services. The system is designed by Sydney bus drivers and aims to replicate actual driver activities. So there's about, just reading through, there's about, oh that was an interesting manoeuvre. There's about 80% of the Brookvale depot services that are drivable. There are some peak hour services that are missing, including express and limited route stops. So if you want to drive a bus to Myrnavale, some of them, the buses have been terminated. Those buses have been terminated in DY, but Act 4, they'll say there'll be map extensions. So now we are driving on the we are driving on the 144 at the moment from Chatswood to Manly. So this map was constructed to be based in the pre-November 2017 era. So there's been some changes to the Northern Beaches bus routes and also the environment. For instance, there's a new hospital called the Northern Beaches Hospital, but all of the photography was done prior to that being built. So it's a very interesting map. Now, to me, there's probably more interest in it because I am based in New South Wales. I have lived in Sydney the vast majority of my life, so there's certainly interest there that is probably higher than most people, because this sort of environment, the traffic lights, the white lines on the roads, the narrow streets, the hills, they're all, I'm pretty sure I've got collisions turned off, by the way. I know I did try changing that, and it didn't seem to make any difference if I had collisions turned on or turned off. It just didn't seem to matter. But little things that I can appreciate that a lot of people who may not have been to Sydney or may not have seen Sydney bus videos or whatever, things I can appreciate. You know, this colour scheme on this bus is what it looks like at this time. There's been various colour schemes that have been done by state transit buses that we'll see in this series, and this is one of them. This is what I really struggle because of how the trees overhang the roads, etc. And I really struggle to find a good spot for the camera at times. But you can see that there's been so much effort put into, for instance, that bus stop, that street sign. Now I don't know all the streets in the Northern Beaches. I know the main ones, but we can get to some of the main streets of the Northern Beaches, for instance, Military Road, and I can appreciate, okay, this is what it would be like going along Military Road. I can recognise those phone numbers on those buildings and probably look those businesses up. As a German police car goes by, you'll notice that from time to time. You know, I could probably look up those businesses and see those phone numbers and work out what street I'm actually on, you know, if I wanted to do that. But this is how true to life this map is. You know, the booming of the bus as it bottoms out. How you get older houses, and then next to them you'll have some units. You know, you just have shops just randomly on the corners. So we've just left Balgowa, which is one of the waypoints, actually the waypoint that's actually shown on the front of this bus, or the via point if you like. Things like the street signs, the speed limit signs, they would have all had to have been custom made. When we see direction signs, that bus stop sign would have had to have been custom made. You can't put a German bus stop sign onto an Australian map if you want to be an authentic Sydney map. You know, you could imagine driving this bus down this street, and this is what it feels like. Those directional signs, the traffic lights, dare I say the trees, buildings under construction. You know, it would have taken, as they mentioned in the FAQ, it would have taken a lot of time to look at these buildings and photograph them the right way and have the right building next to the next building, next to the next building, next to the next building, and that sort of thing. And in some ways, working with an engine, game engine that OMSI uses, and the OMSI base, has probably worked out well, because as we found out during the FAQ, the map has come to this stage over 7 years. So if you've got the engine, the base that's constantly changing, and this is where some train simulator map, bus simulator maps, etc. You know, if there's been a change to the version of OMSI, for instance, you know, you might have some things in your map, and then all of a sudden, those things are broken because there's an update. Those things are broken. A classic example of that, in my Truck Simulator series, you've got American Truck Simulator and Euro Truck Simulator 2. And there's been a lot of map mods that have been created using those assets. And then if there's a new version put out and there's been new things added or things taken away, then those mods have to be updated. Those maps have to be updated. Another local-ish example that I can think of with Euro Truck Simulator is the Japanese map, Project Japan, where they have used the European base of Euro Truck Simulator, and then they've basically turned it Japanese. So what happens when there's a new update to Euro Truck Simulator? The creators of Project Japan have to adapt what's changed in the base and what's changed in the DLCs that they're using for their assets, and then adjusting it. And it's not as if Euro Truck Simulator, the company behind that, are going to give them a heads up and say, hey, guess what, guys, you know, coming up in 2 months is a change that you're going to have to adjust for. Here's a good example of a bus lane. The red lane, they're not always painted in red, but in many places they are, to help distinguish if it's a bus lane. Sometimes they're a bus lane for limited periods, it's indicated on the signs, and then at other times, just depending on how busy the corridor is, sometimes these are dedicated 24-hour bus lanes, but certainly in the peak hour. Now I can't help but notice the thing that we're actually going away from Manly, and that maybe we should have Chatswood on the front of the on the bus, but we'll just go with it. This looks like, I could be wrong, we could be heading down towards the Spit Bridge. It looks like that general area. This is what they were talking about. It's what they were talking about in terms of the hills, because there are some incredibly hilly areas of Sydney, and then you basically come back down to sea level or to river level, and then you have to go up again. So what's planned? What have I got planned for this series? I've got a whole heap of routes that I'll be getting the AI to drive. As I mentioned, I just find it easier for the AI to drive, and that was after issues that I had early on with London's map, where I'd be driving and I'd be getting lost and all of that sort of stuff, and then all of a sudden I'd come up to a road and all of a sudden the building would be straight across the road. So I'm thinking, oh well, maybe that's the end of that part of the map. Maybe because I'm not driving on the correct route, so I'm going the wrong way. Then I let the AI buses drive, and they were doing exactly the same thing. So I've decided, in OMSI at least, as much as possible, people want to drive. People want to see the scenery. So we're passing over the Spit Bridge. So we're crossing over Middle Harbour, and that bridge actually, at certain times, it's a opening bridge to allow tall boats through. So at certain times, the traffic actually stops and the bridge raises. So that's exactly where I thought. So this part is really close to the water and really low, and then we're about to climb up again and head towards Mossman, and it's about to get collisions turned off, obviously, and not necessarily the way that I would have tried to re-enter for all those parked cars to get back onto the road. But anyway, OMSI do have some very interesting glitches that goes wrong. So we're passing the Middle Harbour Yacht Club. And this part gets really steep. Takes a bit of skill to get these buses up these steep hills. Probably doesn't. This would probably be a different view from the driver's point of view, and we will show you some views that are from the driver's point of view through this series as well. So I'm just going to be driving a whole heap of routes as far as I can, sort of thing. And what I have noticed in OMSI in general, and this also happened during the London series, sometimes I'd actually record. I'd put AI mode on and put the driver in the bus and just let them go wild. And I'd be at my place of employment and just recording the whole time while I was there. Because I'm thinking, well, the camera can follow the bus wherever it goes. So I might have 7 hours of footage thinking, oh, the bus has covered most of the general area, while I've been away. And then I get back and I have a look and there's like 5 minutes of footage that I can use, and the rest I delete because I can't use it. So heading the other direction down to Spit Bridge, there's a 35 kilometre an hour advisory sign over there on the left hand side, which gives you some sort of indication of how steep it is to drive down to Middle Harbour if you're heading in the other direction. So I've recorded quite a bit of footage. There's more footage to come that I'll be recording and featuring on episodes such as this. But what the idea of this episode is to give you a guide into this map in itself, a bit of a guide to me, because there may be some new people watching. So I've been doing YouTube videos for simulators since 2016. Not constantly during that period. There were some gaps in between that period. In between, there were some gaps, 2017, 2018, 2019, and then started getting back into it. And then since moving to Newcastle in 2020, I've had a lot of responsibility that I don't have at the moment. I basically cut my commute to my real place of employment down from an hour, hour and a half. That briefly went up to 2.5, 3 hours for a couple of months, and now it's down to 3 minutes in each direction, a 3-minute walk. And so I've been able to spend a lot more time on videos such as this. There's so many different types of simulator videos and roleplay videos that I do, so I might just run through them just for the benefit of anybody new. I do sports videos on full release on Saturdays and Sundays, so there might be things like cricket, various ball sports, love ice hockey, so there's a lot of that. That sort of thing there. So that's, I just call them sports ball episodes, and they're Saturdays and Sundays, they're released. On Mondays is emergency services role plays, so things like police simulators and that sort of stuff, police, fire, ambulance simulators, Mondays. And also in the future, Mondays will also be days motorsport simulators. So things like Formula 1, MotoGP, those sort of things will be Mondays. Tuesdays and Thursdays are for transport. So Tuesdays is buses, trucks, buses and trucks and trams. Haven't really seen a good ferry simulator yet, although I did see one which might work better now that I've been upgraded my system a little bit. So trucks, trams, buses are on Tuesdays, and trains are on Thursdays. On Wednesdays, workshopy type games, so bus mechanic simulator, train mechanic simulator, train station renovation, those sort of workshopy type games, workshopy type sims on Wednesdays. And also Wreckfest, which is like a demolition derby, smash 'em crash 'em type, so that's on Wednesdays. And in conjunction with that, also do some monster truck simulations on what I call Wheels Up Wednesday, so that's on Wednesdays. Thursdays, as I mentioned, were trains from all around the world, mainly Train Simulator and also Train Sim World, including on Train Simulator talking about local models and not seeing any Australian routes, etc. There's actually a New Zealand route out now for Train Simulator 2021 that you can purchase, that I've featured and still I'm in the middle of featuring, so that's cool. And then Fridays, to complete the week, Fridays is flight simulators. So at the moment, in the last month or so, I've had the computer upgraded and I can run pretty well Microsoft Flight Simulator, so I'm using that. And enjoying that. And I've also got X-Plane loaded, and I'm doing a whole heap of Microsoft Flight Simulator episodes first, and then I'll get back into X-Plane. So they're on Fridays. And also on Fridays, well, it's been a little bit of time since I've recorded an episode, Farm Simulator. So I also record Farm Simulator as well. So all of that, simulator.gaming.com, and also there's various playlists, Simulator Dirk on YouTube, and there's lots of different playlists depending on what tickles your fancy, what you find interesting. So that's basically my release schedule. I don't do this full time. I don't get any games or any simulators for free, because I don't have a huge audience, I know that. Mainly doing it for the fun. This is more of a relaxation, more of a hobby, an alternative to what I really do. Thursdays, if you want to hint what I do. But overall it's enjoyable. I like finding things such as this that a lot of people don't necessarily do on this. A lot of people do, who are into this sort of thing, do the London routes or the German routes or the European routes or whatever on OMSI, for instance. But as soon as I found this map when I was just flicking around on YouTube and I saw that there was a video on it, I thought, yep, got to get this, and I've got to get this working, and I've got to see how this works for me. And overall, it works pretty well. A lot of it is just a case of me getting to know which routes are good routes for the AI to drive. And at the moment, the 144 seems to be a good one, and there'll be a lot of different routes that I'll be using over the course of the episodes, where I'll be driving routes like this, not necessarily always from this viewpoint. I do have some footage, and I'll be doing more footage from a driver's point of view as well. With OMSI, I just find it really difficult to drive and talk at the same time, and I find that difficult, because apart from anything else, sometimes I try and sometimes I don't. Try and adjust the camera for instance, when the bus is turning around corners, you'll see that depending on how I have the camera set up, the camera will go through the building as the bus is, how the bus is turning. You know, that's not necessarily a bigger problem when I'm got the driver's view on. But there's certainly a lot of construction going on. The Northern Beaches area is mostly a middle to upper class area of Sydney. There's no train line that actually... we're in Cremorne now. We're just past the Cremorne Super IGA. There's a lot of people who do use public transport, and the amount of cars on the road, I've obviously got the AI turned down a little bit, but depending on the time of day, well, basically all day this road can be very busy, through places like Cremorne and Mossman, Neutral Bay. We're clearly heading into the Sydney, despite what the front of the bus says, or heading in the general direction of the city at the moment. But the roads can get quite busy, and there's a lot of people who do use public transport because they don't want to drive. There's no train line to the Northern Beaches. The closest that there is the North Shore line. Now we will actually see the North Shore line as it crosses over the Sydney Harbour Bridge. It goes through Milson's Point, North Sydney, St Leonards, and up to Chatswood. Won't necessarily see a lot of it on this map. So there are if you're living on the Northern Beaches, there's a few different options that you've got depending on what part of the Northern Beaches you're on, and it's a fairly extensive area. You can catch buses directly from the Sydney CBD, which is obviously what we're featuring. Then there's the ferry services, and ferries do run from Circular Quay, and there's places like Cremorne, Taronga Zoo and Manly where the ferries do run, and then buses link from there. And then you've got the North Shore train line where you'd get buses from places like St Leonard's, North Sydney, Chatswood, Milsons Point, those sort of places where you can get connecting buses to the Northern Beaches. But in terms of catching a train to the actual Northern Beaches, to places like Manly, to places like Brookvale, Freshwater, Mona Vale, Dee Why, Narrabeen, all those sort of places, that's not possible, and has actually met with quite a lot of local opposition by people on the Northern Beaches, even though they'd benefit. There's been various proposals over the years to extend lines to the Northern Beaches, but they've never really happened. So the closest train experience that you'll get would be using the North Shore line and then connecting to buses elsewhere. So we're coming into Neutral Bay, and this is a busy interchange during the morning peaks. So you've got different services use different stands or bus stops here. And same can happen on the other side as well. So it's a good place to interchange if your particular bus doesn't go into the city, for instance. You need to get a bus from where you live to that interchange and then transfer to a city bus, for instance. That's a really popular place to do that sort of thing there. So we're coming up to the approaches towards the Sydney Harbour Bridge. You see a good example of the bus lane there. There's a speed camera or a red light camera immediately behind where it says bus lane. And on the right hand side, the two E symbols ask for electronic tolling for the freeway heading where you have to turn right, so you get into those lanes. So we're starting to come up to the Warringah Expressway general area, which, as we learned in the FAQ, is very, very complex, even for locals, even for people like me who might be from Sydney but don't necessarily use this area. It can be very complicated because you've got various ways that you can go, various lanes that you need to be in to get to certain places. For instance, if you're heading from the north and you want to head towards the west of the city or the south of the city CBD, and you want to go over the Sydney Harbour Bridge, there's certain lanes that you need to be in. Otherwise, for instance, you might be heading to the north of the city, or you might be heading through the Sydney Harbour Tunnel and basically avoid most of the city altogether. And we'll see that in this episode and also other episodes, exactly how complicated that area can be. So we say goodbye to the 144 and that Mercedes-Benz bus, and we head to a different part of North Sydney. We're on an empty bus at the moment that's not in service. Passing by on the left-hand side of camera. Can't really see it in this view, but we just saw the sign for it, North Sydney Oval. So we're in the North Sydney area. And one thing that I did while recording these episodes is that I used the AI buses, and then if one glitched out, what I would try and do is try and find another AI bus in that general area, and then I try and follow that. I'd try and follow that, and then that bus would glitch out or whatever, and then I try and find another one. Sometimes I just have to restart, pick a different part of the map or whatever. But we will see a bit of variety in areas around the map. So the general North Sydney area that we're in is also well serviced by buses going to all sorts of different places, and a little bit further on down we have North Sydney train station and also the North Shore Railway line as well that the buses can connect up with. So now we've switched over. We seem to be stuck, and that group of cars can give you a good idea of why we're stuck at the moment. I think this may have been one of the intersections that was mentioned in the FAQ that I may not have necessarily read on air, but I think it's this intersection, you can see in the actual opening credits, you'll see how they can get stuck, how buses can get stuck, and that's exactly what seems to have happened on this occasion. So we've changed buses again, and we're on another empty run. Interesting to see that the actual driver is glitched out there, so it looks like a ghost driver driving the bus. Now, not in service at the moment, so could well be heading back to the depot. Sometimes there's imbalances in between, your inbound peak hour, which you need a lot of buses on, but then again, at the end of it, you need to get back to the depot, or you need to get back to the Northern Beaches to provide services, and sometimes it's just easier just to run empty, run not in service. You've got all sorts of different rules and regulations and laws in relation to driver fatigue and how often and how continuously they can drive, and it wouldn't be uncommon if you're at the top end. If you're at the top end of the Northern Beaches, say Mona Vale, DY, Palm Beach especially, that general upper Northern Beaches area, and you're coming to somewhere like the city, you could well spend in peak hour, you could well spend an hour or more getting into the city, and then getting out. You might have a school run to do in the middle of that. There's a lot of dedicated school runs that don't run on the public routes, on the normal passenger routes. They're exclusively for school students. School students can use the regular bus routes, but here in Sydney at least, there's a lot of dedicated routes that are just for school students, because the school, for instance, might not actually be on a regular bus route. Or you've got, for instance, when I went to a high school and a public and a primary school, they were next door to each other, but they had quite a wide range of areas that people would come from to go there within the local area. And at the time that I was there, the schools themselves weren't necessarily on a regular route. They weren't a part of the regular route, because the buses just weren't routed that way to get to wherever they needed to go. So in that instance, there was a lot more dedicated school buses that would run to the school, because they wanted to keep the route buses in the morning peak, especially for those people going to the train stations, so they could get the train into the city. And a lot of the routes, the way that the routes were set up, they were direct from the suburbs to the train station. They didn't go anywhere near my school, so people either had to use the route buses and then walk, or they had to use one of the dedicated school routes, and these school routes only ran for the benefit of the school students from whatever suburbs to the school in time for school to start, and then the same in the afternoon. They used to divert the occasional route bus. But generally from the schools that I went to, they were dedicated school buses. So we're in the St Leonard's area at the moment. We just passed but didn't see. We will see at a later stage the Royal North Shore Hospital. And we're on the Pacific Highway heading up from St Leonard's through to Arts Harmon and the general direction of Chatswood. So the Pacific Highway basically follows the North Shore Railway line. They go back, they crisscross each other several areas along the Pacific Highway from the city via North Sydney, St Leonard's, Chatswood, Linfield, Gordon, up the upper North Shore to Hornsby. And there's quite a few places where the Pacific Highway and the North Shore Railway line cross over. So here we are with an articulated bus, or what we commonly call a bendy bus, on the northern beaches. And the reason that these buses were red, it was part of a inner city wide metro bus network, a high frequency rapid series of routes along major corridors with increased capacity, often but not always with articulated buses, and they were called metro buses, and their routes were with the M prefix. So the whole idea, these buses stopped at limited stops. This one's the M20 heading into the city, and it would only stop at limited stops, and usually the bus stops with the red signs to say, okay, well, you know, it's not stopping at every single bus stop along that route. You could connect with other buses. And these routes were designed, in most part, and certainly in this area, to work with articulated buses. Now this is just not me not moving the camera to keep in contact with the where the bus is actually going. And it was also meant, and it was it just wasn't a state transit / Sydney buses thing. It was across some of the other operators in different contract regions as well. And it didn't matter where these buses were, you know, who operated them. If they were on a metro bus route, they were meant to be red. There were some times, and a lot of times, where the blue buses substituted for the metro bus, but they'd always still be the M20 route, etc. And then Sydney Metro came along, and, you know, changes the government too, but Sydney Metro came along, and then there was thought that the Metro bus branding and the Metro trains branding together might be confusing. There were changes in the way that signage and wayfinding was done across public transport in Sydney, and so it was decided that there was no common ground in terms of what colour was for what mode officially, in terms of coordinated signage, because a lot of areas were in different eras, and to some degree still are. So it was generally agreed that orange would be for trains, sky blue would be for buses, like the sky blue buses that we've seen, red for light rail, which again could have been another reason why the metro buses were red, but now that light rail's become more of a thing, moving away from the metro bus brand, and ferries green. So the vast majority of the metro bus routes have actually been renumbered away from the M series now. I think there's still a couple that's survived, that are still currently M whatever, but not necessarily. If I was to have a look on one of my transport apps now, so the only M buses, the metro buses that currently exist, are the M90 between Burwood and Liverpool and return, the M92 between Parramatta and Hurstville via Chester Hill and Padstow, and the Parramatta to Sutherland and return routes, the M92. Whereas when the metro buses first started, there were a lot of different routes within, 20-30 kilometre radius of the Sydney CBD, that often just went through the Sydney CBD. What would often be the case is that buses from the Northern Beaches, for instance, they would go to the city, and then they would terminate, and then they would go back to the Northern Beaches. Whereas the metro buses, they were multi-region, and so you'd have buses that, say, went from the Northern Beaches through the city, and then they went somewhere else. So the whole idea of metro bus was to be a high frequency service in Sydney, with buses running every 10 minutes during the peak, 15 minutes during the off-peak weekdays, and 20 minutes on the weekends. And so they began operation in 2008. That's when it mainly started. So the first route was the M10 route from Leichhardt to Kingsford, so the inner west of Sydney to the eastern suburbs, basically running through the city in that direction. And then the buses expanded. And then from April-May 2019 is when the buses started being renumbered. And that's when, you know, you see the red metro buses basically working anything now. So we had the M10 from Leichhardt to Maroubra Junction. So Leichhardt via Camperdown Central Station, Museum Station, Taylor Square, University of New South Wales and Kingsford, ending at Maroubra Junction, commencing in 2008. And so there's been various changes of the routes during that time. M20, which is the one that we're featuring now, ran from Gore Hill to Botany. Gore Hill being on the Northern Beaches / North Shore network through to Botany. This map would only show that as far as Wynyard. So it would run from Gore Hill via North Sydney, Town Hall, Central Stations, Green Square and Mascot, and ending in Botany. The M30 that we'll also see part of during this series, from Taronga Zoo to the city and Sydenham. So it would run from Taronga Zoo through Mossman, Cremorne, Town Hall and Central Station, Sydney Uni, Newtown Station and end at Sydenham, but we'll only see that as far as Wynyard. The M40, which we won't see on this route, but did operate in this general area from Chatswood to Bondi Junction, so from the North Shore direct to the eastern suburbs. So from Chatswood via Willoughby, Town Hall, Museum, Taylor Square, Paddington and ending at Bondi Junction. And then we start heading out and about a little bit, going further away from the city and not necessarily going through the city. The M41 from Hurstville to Marsfield. So going via Bexley North, Clempton Park, Campsie and Burwood stations, Concord Hospital, Road Station, Top Ryde City Shopping Centre, Macquarie Centre Shopping Centre and ending in Marsfield. The M50 running from the inner west to the eastern suburbs, Drummoyne to Coogee, via Victoria Road, Town Hall and Central Stations, Cleveland Street, Randwick and ending at Coogee Beach. The Parramatta to City route, the M52, basically following Victoria Road. So it would run through places like Rydalmere, Top Ryde City, Gladesville, Drummoyne, Town Hall and Martin Place stations and terminating at Circular Quay. The M54 to from Parramatta to Macquarie Park, so running via Carlingford and Epping stations, Macquarie Park station and then ending in Macquarie University station rather, and ending in Macquarie Park. The M60 from Parramatta to Hornsby, so running from Parramatta via Balcombe Hills, Castle Hill, Cherrybrook, Pennant Hills, Thornley, Normanhurst and Waitara, ending in Hornsby. The M61 from Castle Hill to the Queen Victoria building in the city, running basically via the M2 motorway. And then we go further out, the M90 from Burwood to Liverpool, from Burwood via Strathfield, Shallora, Bankstown, Milperra, Moorebank and Liverpool. The M91 from Parramatta to Hurstville, so we're not only linking the city, but we're linking major centres within the inner city up to about a 20-30 kilometre radius. So from Parramatta via Granville, Chester Hill, Yagoona, Bankstown, Padstow, Peakhurst, Penshurst and Hurstville. So you could do these as train trips as well, but it'd be a lot longer and not as direct. And then finally the M92 from Parramatta to Sutherland via Rosehill, Lidcombe, Bankstown and Padstow stations. And so if we're to have a look at those routes now and see what they've become after the period which this map is set in. This map was set in pre-November 2017, and there's been a lot of changes since as the Metrobus brand slowly died. So the M10 finished in October 2020, that's been withdrawn altogether. The M20 was renumbered to the 320 in February 2020. So the route that we're on now would now simply be the 320. The M30's been renumbered the M30's been renumbered the 430. The M40's been renumbered to the 340. The M41's been renumbered the 410. The M50 was withdrawn along with the M52. The M54 was renumbered the 550. The M60 was renumbered the 600. And the M61 was absorbed into Route 610X. All of those changes happening in 2019, 2020, 2021. So only the M90, the M91 and the M92 currently exist in their current form, but there's a mixture of red and blue buses on those routes. So I'll leave a link, if I remember, to this article which highlights some of the history, some of the route changes, etc. And then, of course, there was the B line, which I should also talk about. We did mention the B line earlier. Serving the northern beaches. So we're coming up to the approach of the Sydney Harbour Bridge as we just drive through Mercedes-Benz there. The B line started service November 2017. Runs from Mona Vale to Wynyard via Warriewood, Narrabeen, Collaroy, Dee Why, Brookvale, Manly Vale, Spit Junction and Neutral Bay. So the bus just ran through the toll booths that are no longer there, and on the far side, on the left-hand side, is the North Shore Railway line. So we're now running over the Sydney Harbour Bridge. This is a dedicated bus lane, a 24-hour bus lane that this bus is running on. So we're just crossing over the Sydney Harbour Bridge. There it is, the Sydney Harbour Bridge. B-line buses run every 3 to 4 minutes in the peak and up to every 10 minutes in the off-peak. End-to-end journey time from Wynyard to Mona Vale and vice versa, 65 minutes. And there is the Sydney Harbour Bridge. So Wynyard Station, the Neutral Bay Junction, Spit Junction, Manly Vale, Warringah Mall, Dee Wye, Collaroy, Narrabeen, Warriewood and Mona Vale. And what that also led to, that led to a lot of the changes that was referred to earlier in the FAQs, where the bus system was reorganised. Some bus routes were discontinued. There were 23 routes that were discontinued as a result at the time. 4 new routes introduced, and some extensions and some renumberings. The buses are bright yellow double-decker buses. And it is a good service. I have ridden on it. There's been talk about extending it further onto the northern beaches up towards Palm Beach. These toll booths no longer exist either. So there used to be people in those toll booths every day collecting money for toll money as the cars went over the Sydney Harbour Bridge. The interesting thing about the tolls on the Sydney Harbour Bridge and also the Sydney Harbour Tunnel, which still exists to the day, that the tolls are only southbound heading into the city. So if you do the return trip from the northern beaches to the city in your car, you only get charged southbound. You don't get charged northbound. Whereas all the other tolls in Sydney, and there's quite a list, you get charged in both directions. So the toll booths were manually operated. You gave the person the toll money, or you put it into the basket. That later became automated, and then the people were replaced with electronic tags in the end. And those toll booths have now been removed. Because they were just an obstacle in the end, and people did crash into them occasionally. But it's very interesting. It's a very busy corridor. The northern beaches into the city. You basically come off the Sydney Harbour Bridge like you have now, trying to use these bus lanes, and then usually the first station that you come into is Wynyard, which is where we're coming into now. And so buses would drop their passengers off here. Some buses would terminate here at Wynyard, and then others would go through to places like Town Hall and Central, the Queen Victoria building at Town Hall Station, Central, and others would continue further. A lot of people would, if the bus terminated at Wynyard, obviously everyone would get out. Some people would walk from there, other people would connect to other buses, other people would connect with trains to go to wherever they were going from the northern beaches, because, as I said, no direct trains from the northern beaches to the city, and so that's why they've had to rely so heavily on buses, because that's the only form of public transport in many of the areas of the northern beaches. Anywho, I've been Simulator Dirk. You've been wonderful. Thanks for enjoying. There'll be more episodes, more routes, more buses, more points of view in previous episodes. The next episodes won't be as long as this one, but considering that this is the first episode, introduce you to the area, introduce you to the map, everything behind it. I'll leave a link in the show notes to where you can download it and a little bit further reading. Until next time, I'm Simulator Dirk. Thanks for watching, and don't forget, everyone get down the back of the bus, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching, and bye-bye for now. you.